Boy, is you threatening me?
I'm telling you that this is how this is going to work. I'm gonna keep seeing Drew. And you ain't gonna do shit about it.
Is that right?
That's right.
A devil in red is what we normally associate Rock in Raising Kanan with, but in Power Book 2 Ghost, Monet definitely takes the crown. She's someone who never liked having Lorenzo come back and move her out the way in their organization, because that meant she lost control, and she's not a woman who likes losing control. She had very specific positions for each of her Tejada kids, as well as Tariq St. Patrick, who, as she says, is a thinker. Now, what we saw unfold in episode 7 was cold and ruthless, but very clever from Monet in a way she manipulated and set up Kai in a way it looked like him and Gordo worked together to take out Lorenzo, which in turn killed two birds with one stone. But in this video, we're going to be looking at Monet's chess moves in a bit more detail, but more so how this will end up backfiring. So we're going to have a look at 4 key elements: how Monet started an internal war and this battle for power and control within the Tejadas, how she started a war with the Castillos, and how she's the one who's turned Drew into a killer. And lastly, how Kane's just biding his time because he definitely knows something isn't right. He knows full well Monet had something to do with Lorenzo's death. Now, pawns are like soldiers, they can only move one place forward, and often they're the people that are sacrificed first. In episode 5, Monet used the bishop in Gordo to eliminate the king of the Tejadas, and so you'd assume the queen would normally take control, but that's not how the street game works. There's always going to be people trying to take what's yours, even when it comes to family. Monet's also been someone who hasn't been in the game for a while, and I'm going to come back around to that in just a moment. Now, Monet knew she had to come up with a strategy and a plan not just to get some level of control back over her kids and the business, but also cover her tracks when it comes to Lorenzo's death. Manipulating Kai in the same way which she taught Diana in season 1 was definitely key. She knew Kai would love nothing more to get into bed with her, and she played on Kai's desires. This was a mistake that Uncle Frank made in season 1, and why Monet taught Diana the lesson about the male glaze, and how that can be used against them.
It means a man doesn't fall in love with you. He falls in love with the image of himself that he sees in your eyes.
So not only did Monet use this to her advantage in taking out Kai, she messaged Gordo from the burner she was using to message him with, and planted the phone on Kai to make it look like they worked together in taking out Lorenzo, although Monet really is digging a deep grave for herself, and Lorenzo's ghost will only come back to haunt her in more ways than one, because what she started is a chain of events which definitely can't be undone. Chain of events which will lead to blood, internal family struggle, and also her own downfall. Now, this internal war is something that we already saw a glimpse of at Lorenzo's funeral. Lorenzo's body wasn't even cold, and there was already talk about who should be in power, as well as a fight amongst Drew and Kane. Now, we all know this was coming, but Monet definitely didn't help.
You want me to take Poppy's place? Does Kane know that?
Let's just keep it between us for now.
She was contributing towards this divide at a time where they really needed to stick together, especially with law enforcement hunting them down. Now, Kane and Monet are thinking about family, but they have 2 different ways of handling business. Kane's now got this family first mentality, and even though Monet's always wanted to keep her kids out of harm's way, she never shows her hand and her plans with Kane. Ironically, Drew's quickly turning into what Kane was in seasons 1 and 2, and Diana now finds herself sitting at a precinct. Now, although I don't agree with the fight between the 2 brothers at Lorenzo's funeral, Drew made a stupid move at attacking the Russians. The street game does move at a very quick pace, and if someone doesn't establish some level of control, then you're just sitting ducks. But with the Tejadas, they're always on their own shit. Diana's thinking one thing, Drew's thinking another about the Russians, Monet's thinking about covering her tracks, and Kane's putting 2 and 2 together as he has been all season. Now, just a quick one on the funeral while we're talking about Lorenzo. There was a deleted scene around the time of the Russian attack. Chris Lofton, who played Janard on Power Book 4 Force, questioned where did Blanca Rodriguez and Jenny Sullivan go when the Russians came shooting. So Paterno, who plays Jenny, said it was a cut scene. Blanca called reinforcements while they peeled out of there, and Davis says the feds got the Russians, which is something we heard at the end of episode 6. So just some extra info for you guys on a deleted scene. But back to business and this internal power struggle with Monet making her move. Even though she's previously told Drew he needs to take over, that's not what she's really thinking. She knows she needs to be in control. But in episode 7, it was actually clear how far she was from the business during this period where she was grieving Zeke. She had no idea about Lauren on the wire. She also didn't realize how much product Noma was asking them to move, and then she needed the help of a thinker. So this shows how Monet leads. She still sees Kane as the muscle to the Tejada organization and nothing more, but she uses Tariq as the brains. Although I really don't think Monet realizes just how much Kane has stepped up while she was grieving over Zeke, and while she was having issues with Detective Whitman. Now, Monet is someone who isn't playing games this season, and with the beef with the Russians neutralized and with Kai and Gordo being taken care of, she's got some level of control back. But as I said at the start, her actions have started a chain of events which can't be undone, and having Drew kill Gordo will definitely come back, and so on to the Castillos. Now, in episode 5, Monet went to Evelyn with the false information Lorenzo put the hit out on Uncle Frank, when in fact, it was Monet. Her intentions was that she hoped that Evelyn or one of her sons would deal with Lorenzo so it doesn't come back to her. But Evelyn told Monet she didn't want to seek revenge because she didn't want to risk losing any of her boys.
I love Frank, but I love my boys even more. I can't risk losing one of them for the sake of revenge.
Now, we also have to bear in mind, a few of the Castillos were against working with the Tejadas in the first place because some of them believed that they were behind the Russian attack, which forced them to turn to the Tejadas, so we saw them turn to a vote where not all of them were in favor. Fast forward to episode 7, we also saw a further conflict amongst the Castillos where some of them wanted a 50-50 split if they were to stick by the Tejadas. Again, this went to a family vote. Now, one of the most important elements we have to bear in mind is Gordo was somewhat the peacemaker between the Castillos and the Tejadas. Monet said Gordo was whipped over Drew, but to always have his ear, and not the Castillos, and so in episode 7, he smoothed things over. Gordo was the one who sandwiched himself between the two families and made his brother come around to the idea of backing the Tejadas. But what did Monet go and do? She manipulated the situation with Kai and Gordo, taking the fall for Lorenzo's death, because Gordo was a loose end. She didn't want to risk the truth coming out that she was behind Lorenzo's death, and with Gordo being as close as he was to Drew, that was a risk Monet wasn't willing to take. Now, we're going to come to Drew turning into a killer in just a moment, but what do you guys think will happen when Evelyn finds out Gordo is dead or missing? What do you guys think she thought when she turned down Monet when she gave her the info on Lorenzo, only to find out Lorenzo was murdered moments later? Evelyn and the Castillos are going to be a big problem for the Tejadas, especially because Gordo is no longer around. So where Evelyn refused to seek revenge for Uncle Frank because she didn't want to lose any of her boys, well now she has. So this time, I don't think she's going to back down for a second time. She's going to want answers and revenge, and so will the rest of the Castillos. Now let's not forget about who pulled the trigger on Gordo. So Monet looked at Drew and knew Gordo was a distraction and also a threat, and you don't threaten someone like Monet Tejada. But just look at how happy Drew was. For the first time he's found someone on the same wavelength who brought back his love for art. But Drew definitely is a character who has his trigger point, one which we've only seen glimpses of in seasons 1 and 2, but ever so slowly we started to see him turn. We also saw it earlier in the season when Eb broke up with him, where he followed up with ruthlessly killing Nick, the personal trainer. But there's nothing worse than killing someone you love, because that's what turns you into a real killer, and Drew can thank Monet for that. What Monet's done is unleash the savage in Drew, and what does Drew have left? Lorenzo's gone, Ev is gone, and now so is Gordo, and I do think that's going to be the last of Drew's love life we're going to see for a while. So I see someone who may be a little reckless, but also someone who will want to lead the Tejada organization, and so that brings me on to Kane. What exactly is Kane's next move? Because he knows full well Monet had something to do with Lorenzo's death, and so it's only a matter of time before that info comes to light. Something we haven't seen yet is Diana saying Monet's the problem, at which point, she might know it was Monet, so what's their next move? Monet's not afraid to neutralize any sort of threat, and she did send an indirect warning shot to Kane, as well as threatening Diana and Kane in the past, but for now, they're gonna have to fight together to work for Diana and this Rico, but you can bet, the Castillos, Drew and Kane are gonna be a big problem for Monet. So could something Tariq said in season 2 come back as well? She may think she's in control, but she's on an island and she doesn't even know it.